Hey, welcome back to Love Fashionably. I'm so excited that you are here. I know we are a week later than normally planned, but thanks for joining on this different time. It's good to see you again. I hope that you are having a great month. It is crazy. April is flying by, and so is this year. So I guess we better buckle up. You never know what could happen from day to day. Lots of things are changing in my life. I'm sure they are in yours as well. So excited to see what's going to happen. As always, we want to start by giving a very special thanks to BGTV Studios, because without them, none of this is possible. So thank you to them for hosting this podcast each and every week. You can follow them on Facebook, Instagram, all the social medias. Don't forget, when you do follow them, like, share, comment. That will help get visibility out there so that we can continue to reach more and more people. There is a new website for BGTV Studios that you can check out. There you can see the full lineup of all the different podcasts. As I've mentioned before, this is a podcast network, so it's not just Love Fashionably. There are lots of different shows that are happening all throughout the week, starting on Sunday, going all the way through Thursday. So check out some other things that are happening. And then also, one more announcement on the website is a way to give if that's something that you like to do. Different people have different love languages and different ways that they like to show their appreciation for things. So one way, if you want to give, this is a free podcast that happens. So you can pay it forward and check it out at bgtvstudios.com. So, I don't know about you. I kind of needed that little moment because it has been a very crazy past few days for me. As I think I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I was moving, and I did move and got everything settled in. We only had a couple casualties, as in broken nails. I have some friends that are nail biters, and they've always been like, gosh, I bit that one too short. It's like burning. And I didn't really know what that was because I have really long nail beds. Useless information you don't really need to know about me. But it broke off and it was burning. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what they've been talking about all these years. I had no idea. And then I have another one that's kind of split halfway up partially, so I'm trying to keep that from splitting all the way and having another situation. But it was kind of a hectic time. I've kind of been in the middle of a move since probably the first of the year when I really started this journey, and then just wrapped it up a couple days ago. So it's been exciting, and just kind of thinking in that kind of zone of a move and that kind of phrase, middle of a move, is had me thinking on a certain person in the Bible. You could probably think of several different people because there's a lot of different people. They're always on the move throughout the Bible. There's always been a move. There's always different movements that we've seen throughout our generations. There's always revival movements. There's always Christian movements. There's always things that are happening. But when I was thinking of the one particular person, Jacob. So he may not be the first person that you think of. You may not know a whole lot about him. I think what we mostly know about him just from, well, if you were like me and you grew up in church, then you kind of just know that Jacob has a bad rap, that he's not a really good person, and that's pretty much it. You kind of put it, I don't know if you're like me, but when you're growing up, you kind of put your Bible characters, they're on the naughty or the nice list. Like Santa, you have the ones that are those are the really good, strong ones. Moses, yes. Joshua, yes. Jesus, of course, yes. And then you're the naughty ones, and you're well, Peter's kind of in between, Jacob, he doesn't get a good rep, so he's on the bad list. There's probably several more. But until I really studied him, I heard other messages about him that it really opened my eyes to know that me and Jacob are a lot more alike than I would probably even care to realize or to admit, but I guess I kind of did. So here we are. So I want to talk about it a little bit because Jacob has a really beautiful redemption moment, and we all do when we come to the cross. We all have that beautiful redemption moment. And we get to really start over with Jesus. And Jacob gets the same thing. And I've kind of been going back and forth, so I don't know if we're going to get all the way through Jacob's story tonight. We may just kind of hit a few parts of it and then may do a part 2. We'll just kind of see how it all works out. But as I mentioned, we're going to start, and I've got just like chunks that I want to read, because I guess my goal in this is kind of like how it was with Ruth when I just presented different parts, and then I want the Holy Spirit to speak to you and reveal things to you, and then you can go back to and search it on your own. And so we're going to start kind of from the beginning of his story in Genesis 25, verses 19 through 26. So it says, "This is the account of the family of Isaac, the son of Abraham. When Isaac was 40 years old, he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, Armin. I'm butchering some of this from, I think it's Padam Aram. I don't know if I'm saying any of that right, but we're going to go with it. And the sister of Laban. Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was unable to have children. The Lord answered Isaac's prayer, and Rebekah became pregnant with twins. But the 2 children struggled with each other in her womb. So she went to ask the Lord about it. Why is this happening to me? I'm sure we've all been there. Why is this happening to me? We've prayed for it. That's what you wanted. But then you're like, oh, but why? And the Lord told her, the sons in your womb will become 2 nations. From the very beginning, the 2 nations will be rivals. One nation will be stronger than the other, and your older son will serve your younger son. And when the time came to give birth, Rebekah discovered that she did indeed have twins. The first one was very red at birth and covered with thick hair like a fur coat. So they named him Esau. And then the other twin was born with his hand grasping Esau's heels. So they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. So I wanted to read that part because it kind of sets up the part about their birthright. So like it, where it says the Lord spoke to you, he prophesied about what they would be, he told the future of them, and gave the importance of the birthright. Which one was born first? I think in America we don't really understand birthright. I think we've probably just become a little bit more aware just because of probably things like the crown and, the royal family that we watch and see. But we don't fully understand it because we don't have to be in positions of that. People in positions of royalty, it's a really big deal. So your birthright, your firstborn, gets the rights to everything, like how we have watched throughout our generations. Prince William was the firstborn. Prince Harry was the second. So William got the birthright. He is in line to the throne. And in this day, that's what that meant. So it's not like a kingdom. It's not like a crown situation, but it was like, who's going to receive the wealth of the family? Who's going to receive the blessing and the promise? And it was out of their control. The children, the 2 boys, they had no control who was going to go first, except that it says that Jacob from the very start was always grasping for what he didn't have. He was always grasping for something that he wanted, that he didn't necessarily well, we'll get there. I guess it is his. So he's grasping for what is his, but, from from an earthly perspective, it wasn't supposed to be his, is a better way to say it. And then so after that, they're born. So we see that Jacob is kind of always fighting. I'm really glad we don't name kids like how they name kids, like, oh, he came out hairy. Oh, Esau, like, oh, that one, he's grabbing somebody's heel, Jacob. What if we all named everybody like that now? Like, we would have some, I'm a speech therapist, and I can tell you I have seen some names, and I can tell you some stories. So maybe it is still happening to an aspect, but, to each their own, I guess. But I'm really glad I didn't Oh, that's what she looked like. I guess maybe I look like an Abby. I don't know. But in Genesis 25, verses 27 through 34, it says that as the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter. He was an outdoorsman. So he's like your rough, tough, ragged. And then Jacob, he was quiet, and he preferred to stay at home. He was a homebody. Isaac loved Esau because he enjoyed eating wild game Esau brought home. But Rebekah loved Jacob. So we got a mama's boy and a daddy's boy. One day when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau arrived home from the wilderness exhausted and hungry. Esau said to Jacob, "I'm starved. Give me some of that red stew." "All right," Jacob replied, "but trade me your right as the firstborn son." "Look, I'm dying of starvation," said Esau. He was hangry. "What good is my birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "First, you must swear that your birthright is mine." So Esau swore an oath, thereby selling all his rights as the firstborn to his brother Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and lentil stew. Esau ate the meal, then he got up and left. He showed contempt for his rights as the firstborn. That part, I guess, I never really understood that until I took a deeper study with it. And then I kind of understand because I can see myself in Esau. I don't know if you can, but like when there are places, Esau is in this moment, he's representing the things that you want to do from like, oh, I'm just going to do what I feel. So he felt hungry. So he was like, well, I don't really need that birthright. So in the moment, it felt right. But then he despised it after it was done. And so that's why I've kind of mentioned, I think I've mentioned before about how sometimes your feelings are fake. It's not that you don't feel them. It's not that they aren't real, that you aren't feeling. He felt hungry, but if he didn't give in to hunger, he would still own his birthright. But because he gave in to what he was feeling, he lost what was his right. And there's a tie from this to where God is kind of giving us a warning. It's like, why would he include this in the Bible, this story? And you kind of read it and you're like, okay, great. He sold his birthright. Who cares? You know, it's just Jacob's tricking him again. Like, good old Jacob on the naughty list again, you know, like he's just done something else wrong. But then when you look in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 16 and 17, it says, "Make sure that no one is immoral or godless like Esau, who traded his birthright as the firstborn son for a single meal. You know that afterwards he wanted his father's blessing. He was rejected. It was too late for repentance, even though he begged with bitter tears. Make sure that no one is immoral or godless like Esau." That was a warning from God that he was not approving of what Esau did in that moment. And it just goes to show that maybe there was more at play in this full story than what you're kind of told on your felt board Bible study, that Jacob's the bad guy and Esau's the good guy. Because right here, looking back, the perspective of a situation always gives more clarity. And looking back, God's saying, Esau, that ain't it. Like, that's not what you were supposed to do. But God has a plan and he's sovereign in all of it. Because really, even though it says that, because I think in the beginning it says, your older son will serve your younger. The older son is Esau. Jacob is the younger. God prophesied from the beginning that Jacob would get the promise and the birthright, but they just weren't paying attention as they walked through the story. Or maybe they were, but I think we've probably missed it a lot in our society because we paint Jacob as such this bad guy, when really from the very start, God said, hey, here's your warning. This is what's about to play out. What's going to happen? And in the Hebrews, it kind of mentions the blessing and that. So that's the other part of Jacob's major trickery that you've heard. He stole the birthright, and then he's going to steal the blessing. So from the birthright to the blessing, Jacob's going to steal it all. He's going to trick his brother. But what I missed until I read it a few years ago was the trickery of the blessing didn't come from Jacob. It came from Rebekah. It came from his mom. His mom overheard what was about to go down. And remember, Jacob's her favorite. And so she overheard Isaac telling Esau what he was going to bless him. And so Rebekah goes to Jacob. And in Genesis 27, she tells him what to do. And he's like, oh, I don't really know. Like, this may not be a good idea. And she was like, well, if there's a curse, let it follow me. She's like, you're going to do this. And so they go through the process, as you probably know. And I mean, it has to be very hastily kind of thrown together. She's like, okay, now go out and get 2 goats and then bring it in. You're going to make some stew, and then you're going to take it to your dad. And then we're going to take those goats and we're going to put them on you. And when I read that, I'm sitting here thinking, I mean, Jacob's really got to be in this for like something good. Cause I'm like, okay, there's probably a process. Like, I don't know. I'm just like kind of germaphobe, I guess, but I'm thinking there is still blood and guts all over this stuff that he's about to put on to go into his dad. How does Isaac not like get tipped off that from the smell of the nasty goat? But anyway, I digress. Anyway, that's just what I think. Like, I just bring it like how it would, like what it would be. I mean, you think in your head, oh, okay, it's probably real cleaned and they've washed it and it looks real nice. He's going to put it on like a nice fur coat. That's not what's happening. Like, this is it just came from the farm. Like, we're just going to put it on with the dead flies still flying around it. And he goes in and he convinces Isaac that he really is Esau because he has the clothes on. He has the proper covering on, and he goes into Isaac and he's like, okay. And he gives him the blessing. And then we know that after the blessing, Esau's coming in around that time, and then he figures it out that it was over and he lost it. And so Jacob stole the birthright and the promise. And it reminded me of this, and then I was kind of looking through some of my old notes, and I saw when I went to, I used to go and visit with this man. He was very well versed in Greek in the Bible, and he would teach me and some of my friends some different like parts of the Greek throughout the New Testament and part of the Old of what he knew. And I wrote this down, and that he said the same word in the Greek that talks about the separation of the firstborn is the same word that's used for the wall that separates the Jews from the Gentiles. And that's the same wall. And he said that that's the same wall that Jesus died to get rid of. And it reminded me of this too. It's a cycle. It's a continual cycle. Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, Esau. And actually, it even says that when Esau gets mad, he goes out and he marries someone within Ishmael's family. And so it's just a continual Ishmael, Esau, Isaac, Jacob. We could go probably throughout history and we could find ourselves still there today. In this same battle, which side of the wall are you going to be on? Which side are you going to do? Are you going to do what feels right? So Ishmael, if you don't know who Ishmael is, he was the product of a disobedient promise. The Isaac is the chosen son, is the promised son of Abraham and Sarah. And Ishmael is what they tried to make happen. Esau lost his birthright because he tried to make something happen for himself in the moment. And again, we kind of always thought that Jacob was the bad one because he's always playing these games and these trickery, and he's kind of getting his way. But I think we can kind of see where he was kind of being led the whole way into his promise. We'll kind of go ahead and talk about it a little bit. So like my favorite part in Jacob's story is he goes off. So they tell him to leave. I'm really going to condense this a lot, but they tell him to leave. He goes off and he marries two wives from his uncle Laban's family, and he lives there for a while. And then he kind of has to leave his uncle Laban, and he's on the run from him. And there's twice when he's on the run, when he's on the move, where he meets God. He's in the middle of a move, and he with his family, and he meets God at this place he names Bethel, because he said that God was in this place and I didn't even realize it. And I love that because he establishes that part in his life. At one point, he goes on his journey, and then later on in his life, he comes back. He's traveling back, and he's decided he's going back to Bethel. And he's like telling his servants and everyone, because obviously he's living right, but he's not living as pure of a life as he knows. And he knows that Bethel is the place where he's met God, because he starts to tell him like, hey, get rid of all those idols and things that you've got in your tent. We're going back to Bethel. And at Bethel is the place where he has two wives. Again, all throughout Jacob's life, there's like a favorite and a not favorite. He had a favorite wife and a not favorite wife. Probably why you shouldn't have two. But his favorite wife, she dies there. And he buries her. It says he buries Rachel. Jacob buries Rachel, and Israel moves on. Because we find that over the course of Jacob's life that God renames him. That he says, you're no longer Jacob, you're Israel. You're my chosen people. You're my chosen person. But he never will really say that about himself. How many times do we do that? God says these things about us, but we choose not to see them, or we don't call them out in ourselves. So it's always good to have people around you that'll call that out when you don't want to see it in yourself. But God was that for Jacob. He kept calling him Israel. And I loved that part because he finally realized he buried the thing that God needed for him to bury in order for him to be able to move on into the promise, into the place that God had for him. And that's just such one of my favorite parts and my favorite story of Jacob, because he is a promised one. He was Israel, like how we talked last time with Cinderella. She got a new name. She slept by the fire and she got a new name. Jacob slept by the fire of God, and he wrestled with God, and he was touched, and he got a new name. And God is in the process of doing that over and over and over again in our lives. And so, I don't know, that was just part that, like, that story's just kind of been going through my mind. Jacob was in the middle of a move, and he met God. And we're always on the move in our lives. We're moving from one thing to the other. You may be moving from cities or from a different state, maybe from appointment to appointment all throughout your day. But God is there to meet us in the middle of each one of our moves that we make. And so I just wanted to bring that as a reminder tonight, that just to bring him back to the forefront. That's just kind of what's been playing in my mind just in this move, is just to kind of remember, okay, I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and just kind of being open to see what's going to happen next. I don't think Jacob had that planned for his life. I don't think that he was thinking, oh, I'm going to be Israel. Because, and I almost forgot one of my second favorite parts. I guess my favorite part is, we said that, I was talking at the beginning, how we place our Bible characters on the naughty and nice list, and we have Jacob on the naughty list. But if you do it that way, then Israel is his good side, and he would be on the nice list. Because when God chooses throughout eternity, God has lots of different names, but one of the names you've probably heard is he's the God of Abraham, he's the God of Isaac, and he's the God of, you would expect, Israel, because that is the good side of Jacob. That's the promise. But he already has the promise, because Abraham, he's the God of Abraham. He's the God of faith. He's the God of Isaac. He's the God of the promise. And he's the God of Jacob. He's the God of your darkness. He's the God of your bad side. He's the God of the side of you that you don't want anyone to see, the side that you think you have to hide from him. He's saying, I'm all of it. I've got it all right here. I'm all you need. And I just love that that's one of his names that he chooses to go by, that he chooses not to run from it or not to hide from it. And that means that we don't have to either. And so I just wanted to encourage you with that tonight. It's been very encouraging to me. Those are like my favorite parts of the story. So there is so much more. I just really condensed that in. So we'll probably dive into that second half another time. But my prayer is just that you would just make God be in the middle of your moves with you, whatever that move is. Again, it can be the smallest thing, from a doctor's appointment to your work, or it can be traveling all over. Just put God in the middle of wherever you are. So thank you again for joining me. I was going to say every week. It almost came out. I guess that means that's where we're headed. For now, we are just the first and third of every month. So again, I appreciate it. Have a great week, and I will see you again very soon.